force. Now, what is the main purpose of bringing it? I'll just read it for you. It was towards fulfilling the preamble promise of securing all the citizens' justice, social, economic, and political under Article 39A of the Constitution of India, which provides free legal aid to the poor and weaker sections of the society to promote justice on the basis of equal opportunity. So it is one of the constitutional mandates which ensures free legal aid to the marginalized population. And again, under Article 14 and 21 of the Constitution, also make it obligatory for the state to ensure equality before law. In 1987, the Legal Services Authorities was enacted by the Parliament, which came into force in 1995. Now, just see the dates here, which should be little of concern that in 1987 the act was there, but it was never put in force till 1995. So that is a concern. To establish a nationwide uniform network for providing free, competent legal services to the weaker sections of the society. So, what are the services which NALSA was supposed to offer to the people? That was number one, legal aid, which we are going to be talking about very extensively. Number two, lok adalat, mediation, legal services literacy. Now, this is the fourth one is the most important thing: victim compensation and social action litigation. Just let me briefly talk about legal aid. So, types of legal services provided are free legal services provided by NALSA, state authority, and district authority. That also includes payment of court fees, process fees, and all other charges payable in connection with legal proceedings. Providing advocate in legal proceedings, obtaining and supplying of certified copies and other documents in legal proceedings, preparation of appeal paperwork, including printing, translation, and documentation in legal proceedings. So you must understand that when this act was enacted, so it was ensured that the poor or the marginalized person who is approaching judiciary should not incur any expense from his pocket. Even certified copies to the extent would be provided by the state legal services authority. So, what is the eligibility? Who are the kind of people who can avail of free legal aid? Number one is women and children. Number two is members of SC/ST, industrial workmen, which we'll talk about it because there has been a huge issue of migrant labor during this pandemic. Victims of mass disaster, violence, flood, drought, earthquake, and industrial disaster. Disabled persons, persons in custody, and persons whose annual income does not exceed 1 lakh rupees. So one of the most important things to me personally, because I've been working in the social sector for such a long time, is how do we make people aware of what are the fundamental rights, what are the rights of the citizens, how can they hold the governments accountable and seek what is their due by the constitution. So legal awareness this is the information which we have derived from the website of NALSA. So in what NALSA has done till date, so they have done some good work also. In 2018-19, some 176,545 camps were organized throughout India, impacting around 1.97 crore people. So similarly, in the preceding year, 2017 to 2018, 1,65,000 approximately camps were organized, which impacted around 2.1 crore people throughout India. Now, one very simple question is, in a population of 1.3 billion, if we are able to just reach out around 2 crore people, is it okay or still more needs to be done? So another thing which NALSA is mandated to do is conducting training programs. So in 2018 and 2019, the training programs were provided for the following, out of which approximately 31,000 lawyers were trained, 48,000 paralegal persons were trained, and the total training to others, which included people from social services background and students, I mean, it was around 19,400. So again, we have to keep on asking us, I mean, as we go along with the presentation, because I have tried to bring a lot of data in support of things that what are the challenges and where more needs to be done. So this is just a benchmark figure which you should keep in mind as we go ahead and with the presentation. So what are legal service beneficiaries? Who all were the beneficiaries? How many people did it impact? So in 2018, 2019, unfortunately, we do not have the data for 2019, 2020 because I think they must be updating it. In the year 2018 and 2019, some 14,75,000 people were provided free legal aid by Nalsa and State District Legal Services Authority. So in mediation, they settled. I mean, this is all India figures. This is not Punjab, Haryana, and Chandigarh. This is all India figures. Is around 98,000 cases they settled through mediation. And they also conduct permanent lok adalats. So permanent lok adalats, you must be understanding, knowing the concept that the whole idea is to get settlements between the parties instead of making them litigate for years and years. So in 2018, 2019, they settled around 1 lakh cases through permanent lok adalats, and in the same year, for victim compensation, they settled around 10,753 applications, which is a very good work. So what is the mission of Nalsa? I'll just read it out to you. And this will, now when we are reading this, at the end of the presentation, when we talk about challenges, so just keep this in mind. To legally empower the marginalized, excluded groups of society by providing effective legal representation, legal literacy, awareness, and bridging the gap between the legally available benefits and entitled beneficiaries. To strengthen the system of lok adalats and other alternate dispute resolution mechanism in order to provide for informal, quick, inexpensive, effective resolution of disputes and minimize the load of adjudication of overburdened judiciary. So there is an admission to the fact that the judiciary is overburdened, and we have to look for ways of sorting out this issue of judicial pendency through informal means. Now, I'll just bring out, so this is the whole composition of legal aid. Now, how has it played during this pandemic? That is very important because that is the main crux. But before we could have discussed that, these figures were very important to be shared. So under the Disaster Management Legal Services Act 1987, there is Section 12 and Subclause E, which makes victims of disaster who are under circumstances of undeserved want as a result of such disaster eligible for free legal service to file or defend case. So it was a mandate of legal services authorities who have actually taken the lead in providing relief to all the victims of the disaster. Now the scheme, whenever there is a disaster like such, like COVID-19, the scheme, what does the scheme say? The scheme says that the scheme for legal services to the victims of disasters through legal services authorities, the objective of the scheme is to provide legal services to the victims of the disaster, both man-made and natural. So here it was natural, who are under circumstances of undeserved want, being victims of mass disaster, ethnic violence, caste atrocities, flood, drought, earthquake, and industrial disaster. And now, what was the machinery that should have been in place to provide assistance to people, to the marginalized during this pandemic? The state legal services authorities shall establish a core group. Now, all this is already mandated in the Act. This is already put in paper. The state legal services authorities that shall establish a core group in all districts under the control of district legal services authorities to spring into action in the event of disaster, whether man-made or natural. Now, what was the job of the core group which had to be constituted? The core group shall consist of a senior judicial officer, young lawyers, including lady lawyers, selected in consultation with local bar associations, medical doctors nominated by local branch of Indian Medical Association and NGOs by accredited State Legal Services Authority. The Secretary of the District Legal Services Authority shall maintain a register containing of telephone numbers and cell numbers of the members of the core group. Now, what should have been the strategy for the legal aid to the victims during this pandemic? So the strategy should have been that ensuring immediate help by the government and non-government organizations, coordinating with different departments of government, supervising distribution of relief work. Now you please try understanding. This is what was mandated to the civilian administration. But who was doing all this? Was the civilian administration doing all that was mandated during this pandemic? That is a very big question that should be seen. Supervising the construction of temporary shelters, supervision of reunion of families, especially during the migrant crisis. Did we really play a role as a civil society to ensure that the migrant laborers are reunited with their families? Supervising healthcare of victims and preventing further spread of epidemics, supervising the need of women and children, ensuring availability of food and medicine, supervising reconstruction of damaged dwelling houses. So there is a long list, of what all we had to do. The District Legal Services Authority along with the civilian administration. But what really happened during this pandemic? So this is very interesting. I mean, obviously, all of you are very well educated, literate. You would have read a lot of newspapers, TV reports. We all know what happened during this pandemic. The provisions of the Act were not followed. And this is very sad that instead of following the provisions of the Act, we comfortably handed over the entire administration to the police. The regular working of the courts was suspended. People had no recourse to justice. Now, this is very, very concerning. And all the top lawyers in Delhi, like Mr. Dushyant Dave, who is the SCPA bar president, Bar Council of India is raising a lot of voice now that the courts should not be suspended. Why should the courts remain suspended? I mean, tomorrow, if people want justice, how do they approach courts if they are, in a suspended animation? So another thing is that complete administrative control was handed over to the police officials, which included healthcare, distribution of essential services, supply chain management. Now, one question as a civil society which we must ask ourselves is police trained? Was that their job? There are some, there are some 22 to 23 departments in all, in all states. And they are supposed to, there is a healthcare department, there is the essential services, food and supplies department. Where were they? Why were they not put into action? And why was all this work given to the police constables and police officials? And very surprisingly, this has really, really surprised me a lot, that instead of civil services or our civil administration being district nodal officers, police officers were made district nodal officers. So what are the major concerns during this pandemic? Number one was provision of food and medicines to the marginalized population. And I think we have seen very, very terrible scenes on the television, and it has been brought out in our social media that how for want of food and medicines, the poor people have suffered. Provision of residential accommodation. Now again, when I was reading, what was mandated in the Act, this is one of the main things, the provision of residential accommodation for the migrant laborers, which unfortunately took time. Many of the states did very well, but still we really cannot pat our backs and say that we did a very good job in, looking after our migrant laborers. Another one is the increasing cases of domestic violence. Now this is very, very concerning because again, how does a woman who is encountering domestic violence, what is the recourse? Whom should she call? Most of the people do not even know that what is the legal recourse available to them. Then there were increasing cases of police brutality, and to top it all, 15 people were killed by policemen during this pandemic. Now just imagine this. Relate this with what is happening in America. In America, there has been just one death, one killing by a police official, and the whole of US is burning. Here, there were innumerable cases of police brutality. 15 people were killed, and our mainstream media, our this thing, we were not very concerned about it. Safety of under trials and other prisoners. Now, this is another very big issue. That why did we wake up now? Why are so many under trials in prisons? So this was again because if COVID-19 spreads, under trials who have not even faced the justice till date, they would be they might be dying. So what has been the achievement of legal aid during this pandemic? Now, with the indulgence of Supreme Court, some 42,000 under trials and 16,000 prisoners were granted parole. Now, that's a very great thing which happened. Out of 727 cases of domestic violence were reported, out of which 658 were granted legal aid. And as per the guidelines of the Supreme Court, Women and Child Department directed all the state legal services authorities to collaborate with one-stop centers in each state, so that if the calls come to them, they should immediately let the woman in distress know what is the legal recourse available. But can you imagine in a country of 1.3 billion, so effectively we can say such a huge population of women, only 727 cases. Now this is again a very big thing, because I think either the cases have gone unreported, or the women have not been, they have not been made. They did not know that what their rights were and how to report it to the competent authority. Now another thing is that now this is one thing very interesting is challenges and way forward. Now that we have known what have been, what has happened to us, what have been our shortcomings, what have been our strengths. Now, how do we go from here? So it is very important to know certain data. So since 1995, nearly 15 million people have been provided with legal services and advised by legal services institutions established all across the country under Legal Services Act 1987. So only 15 million. Again, you should know the demographic figures of India. Now, 3 legal state authorities are functional at the national level, 36 at the state, 664 at the district level, and around 2,254 at the subdivision level. There have been there has been one legal services authorities. They have been set up in Supreme Court, and there are 36 which are working in separate different high courts. Now, there's been a report from CHRI, which I'll discuss in detail a little later. So, which has pointed out that the lack of optimal financial management, well-trained human resources, poor training of legal aid lawyers on the duties and responsibilities, inadequate performance and monitoring, and absence of mechanisms to gauge customer satisfaction hamper the functioning of legal services authorities to a very great extent. And they have come out with, in very great analysis, they have reached such conclusions. The number of legal providers, a great deal across states, and no uniform standardized policies exist for regulating the number of appointments. Now, issue of appointments, another thing. As on January 2019, there were approximately 63,000 panel lawyers and 69,000 paralegal volunteers working across India. So on the funds allocation, now this is very interesting, that normally we are all convinced that there is lack of funding, and that is why the functioning may not be all that good. So in 2017-2018, 6 states and union territories, including Jharkhand and Assam, had no funds allocated from the state. Now this is very concerning, that when there is no funding to the state legal services authority, how would they function? How would they impanel lawyers? How would they impanel paralegals? Whereas Nagaland, Andhra Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Tripura saw less than 20% provided by the state governments. So, I mean, if the share was 100, they just provided barely 20% of the fund. On the infrastructure front, in 2017, a total 14,161 clinics existed across India, catering to 5,97,000 villagers. Now just imagine the figures, 14,000 with 5,97,000. So on an average, all these figures, one legal service was available to 42 villages. I mean, is it possible to cater? I mean, when we are talking about providing legal aid to the marginalized, I think these figures should be really worrying to us. There were 1,062 jail legal services clinics, and the total number of jails in India are 1,412. So, can you imagine that merely 400 jails, we do not even have legal services clinics which have been established. This is data as per 2017-18. This is the best I could have extracted. I do not know the present figure. So let me put a clarification to that. So about 3 lakh persons approached these clinics, out of which 71%. Now just imagine the figure. Out of, in 1,000 jails, so many people, some 3 lakh people approached, and out of that only 71% people were provided legal assistance. So nationally, India spends around 0.08% of its GDP on judiciary. Now just imagine how much we would be spending on our defense. I do not know the figures right now, but what we are spending on judiciary is very, very low. The total expenditure by the union and state governments amounts to some only 28,000 crores and has increased by 53% between 2016 and 17. However, the major chunk of around 92% of the funding is provided by the state government. Now, what are the lessons that we can learn from this pandemic? The courts must find a solution to conduct regular hearings in future emergencies. We cannot have a state of judicial paralysis where people cannot even approach for seeking recourse. There should be a presence of district legal services authorities and legal clinics in all police stations and chowkis. So this is very important because the kind of police excesses we have seen during this pandemic, and we know that the kind of marginalized population, when they go to police station, people do not write their FIRs, the complaints are not looked after. So there should be a presence of legal clinics in all police stations and chowkis. The police should be entrusted for maintenance of only and only law and order. All people who are who are slightly concerned, this is the first step towards going towards the police state. If we entrust everything to the police and police becomes all in all, it's a very concerning state for a democracy. So all issues concerning civil administration must stay with them only. Second thing, one of the other issues is concerning domestic violence. Now, there has to be more reach out that women in distress who, you are curtailed, your freedoms are curtailed. So in such circumstances, they should know where to call and whom to call and how to seek, what are the legal rights. So there is a great need for training because what we see is that the quality of training and the quantum of training is not sufficient to our lawyers, to paralegal, to our correctional officers. So the quality of, there needs to be a greater quality of training. Legal literacy is a very, very big issue, and I think it must start from the school and college level. We must conduct a lot of sensitization sessions with our schools and college level students and tell them what are their legal rights and what are their legal responsibilities. This is very, very essential. And one thing which this pandemic has shown that in most of the states, over 90%, in a few it is 90%, but most states, over 70% of the essentials were provided by the NGOs and social organizations, which included food and living conditions and all that were all provided by the NGO. So there is a greater role to engage with them on, outreach programs and ensuring that the aims and objectives of NALS are met. So there is another issue, that issues of patriarchy and women rights must be included in literacy. Police and legal reforms must remain the focus. SOPs is standard operating procedures for such emergencies must be in place. There should be better remuneration for lawyers and paralegals, and emphasis has to be on correctional legal structure. We should not have a lathi kind of a thing that we catch hold of people and we are there is a lathi correction. It has to be correctional. There has to be more empathy while dealing with citizens and people of marginalized communities. So what various judges have also said, like Justice A.P. Shah, Justice Muralidhar, they have said a lot of things about how best we can do legal aid, which I think I've run out of time, so I cannot really read a lot. So there a lot need. We have done some very good work. Supreme Court has come up and we have ensured that under trials and prisoners are released. There have been there has been an understanding that migrant laborers were indeed in a lot of distress. So were women, and so are going to be industrial workers in future. So there is a lot of scope of work and reform. And I would just like to end. The real pandemic is injustice. So with that, I would really like to end. My numbers are anyone who wants to reach me or would like to work on such issues, you're most welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Saraf, for such an insightful lecture. You explained the SOPs. You mentioned in detail during the COVID what were the limitations and how you reached out to people. Then reaching out to the unreached, and what contribution legal aid can play to the civil society, to everybody who matters. And I'm sure this lecture has been very useful for our research scholars and also for our students of social work from different departments and the faculty joining in, because legal aid and State Legal Services Authority and anything to do with law is a mandatory requirement for everybody, and everything keeps getting updated, so everybody has to stay updated with the latest. So thank you so much. And there are certain questions in the chat box which I would like to take up. The one question which is there in front of me is, what is the average cost per case of free legal aid to the poor? And this is from Dr. Sukhdev Singh Sohal.
So it depends. There are three different categories. One is for the district courts, one is for high courts, and one is for the Supreme Court. And these are decided by the district legal services authorities themselves. But yes, the payment is so minimal that I would not even like to talk about it. It is barely in a few thousands of rupees, which does not even cover up the cost of typing and other things. It is so less. So mostly what is happening is that young lawyers, who do not have work initially, they are the ones, just to have appearance and have experience, they are the ones who are normally providing or getting impaneled with it. So Justice Muralidhar had recently said that the way the government lawyers are paid, the same scale should be for the lawyers who are working for legal aid. Only then can we get quality lawyers, who would like to come up and help the marginal.
How far our courts are moving towards class questions, rich getting bailed within hours and the poor waiting endlessly?
Yeah, this is a very big concern, and I think we need to talk more about it. Our judiciary has many challenges, and it is very heartbreaking and sad sometimes that the general population has got this kind of a belief system that justice is not for the poor. But let me reassure you, it is not like that. yes, they may not be properly represented, but our judges are very good. They're very conscientious, and in most cases, the justice is done. But yes, this is a very major concern for us.
Thank you, Mr. Saraf. There's one more question. We have seen many violations of human rights with respect to migrants. Should these people be compensated? Is there any provision to help them? If so, how soon will they receive any compensation?
One of the basic, things about any damage is compensation. This is a very basic jurisprudence that if someone harms you or you are damaged, you are entitled to compensate. But let me say with a lot of remorse that our whole structure is so lethargic and uh, rather we are so apathetic to the cause of the marginalized that I really don't think so that is practically going to happen, though it must happen. Why only marginalized migrant laborers? Why not all the entrepreneurs, doctors, the whole population, that has suffered economically. In Western countries, we have seen that such big handouts have been given by the state to the citizens. In US, they've given some 3,400 US dollars to families and to children. But such things are not seen in India. So we need to really introspect and reflect on that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Saraf. I totally agree with you. There's another next question is, as you said, justice system, that is courts got shut down and power was handed over to the police during pandemic. What assurance can we have that this will not happen in the future?
See, the media has to write about it. We have to be very, very. See, ours is not a very strong democracy to the extent I can say because the institutions are very weak and vulnerable. They get manipulated by the people in power. So the people have, and media especially, has to be very vigilant about this aspect that we do not end up being a police state. And this is, we are marching. I mean, I can see we are marching, the way we glorify them, the way we are handing out civil administration work to them. It is very, very sad. It is extremely sad, and the way no one questions about the ills. Just see what is happening in US and just compare that with what is happening in India. 15 people have been killed during this pandemic time by police officials. And do you hear about such concerns in the media or in the social media also? So this is my very this is a thing which we really need to introspect and reflect.
Thank you, Mr. Saraf. This is a question from Arshdeep Singh, my student of social work. He's been attending all the seminars and is a very dedicated and sincere student. He's put one question. Don't you think that the prisoners were much more safe in jails, as we know that the virus can only be transferred to the infected person or the person with travel history? But in the case of prisoners or jails, it was quite easy to keep them safe from this pandemic, as as jails are itself a type of isolation ward.
Okay. Now, see, there were 3, 4 slides which I could not read it to you, but let me share that overpopulation or more than the occupancy is at 117% in Indian jails. So if you go, I mean, I think people must visit, and there should be some this thing. Recently, there were riots in UP also. That the civic conditions, there are no toilets. I mean, where 10 people should be sleeping, there are 20 or 30 who are sleeping in a small room. So just imagine if there is one infection, how fast it spreads. And this is a fundamental right, is right to live. 67% of the occupants in jails are under trial. They have not even faced law. They have not been, convicted by the judiciary. So can we really put them to a risk? That is a very big question. I mean, when a person goes out of the jail, it is to him. He has to fight for his life, and he has responsibility to live or whatever. But we cannot put him in a condition where we cannot provide him basic civic amenities, and he can be exposed to this pandemic.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Now we have a question from Dr. Divisha Sasidevan. She's given an example of vernaculum in Kerala. She's written that would you like to appreciate the Legal Services Authority in Kerala through the intervention of District Legal Service Authority of Ernakulam. We were able to present the condition of the migrant workers to the J- to the Honorable High Court of Kerala.
Ma'am, let me tell you, I keep on writing a lot about it. Kerala High Court has been exceptional. It was the first High Court in our country which suo moto took the case of migrant laborers and police brutality. There was just one case of police brutality in Kerala. The DGP suspended that official, and Kerala High Court immediately took a suo moto notice of it. So yes, Kerala has shown not only, it has not only been an example for India, it has been an example for the rest of the world. Especially the efforts of Health Minister are commendable. And obviously, ma'am, I cannot take away that the lady concerned who represents legal services aid there. You have done a very, very great work.
Thank you, sir. There's one question, Sir Corona from Mr. Vikas Rana, and he's written that social media has done enough to make people aware about their legal rights, or it's still person to person dissemination of information.
No, I really do not agree with it, ma'am. Because when we meet as a lawyer, I'm more interested in having a person, when I meet people, I see that there is a real, there's very, very poor understanding of law and rights. It's just not there. We think that whatever the media people are telling us, these are our rights, but that is not the case. It is much deeper and much, much, much farther. And you have to there has to be a very great effort by all of us, by all people who are working in social organizations and who are in the legal field to ensure that legal literacy is very essential. And I'm very sorry to say that in India, a lot needs to be done about it.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Prerit Malik. Sir, coronavirus proved that Indian judiciary is technologically very backward. What changes should be made to tackle this technological gap?
Yes, we have been raising this issue. See, the whole question was that even Bar Council of India recently have issued a statement that 80% of the lawyers in India are not technological savvy. So if you think that you can have a online kind of a court and judiciary can run on webinars and all, it is impossible. It won't happen. It is not sustainable. And for how long? I would just like to ask this question to all the judges. For how long are we going to have been the suspended animation? Tomorrow if the corona fear carries on for one more year, for 1 year the courts are going to be suspended. There's going to be no. Are we understanding the kind of judicial pendency which is adding each day? Is there a concern about it? I'm really very, very anguished and rather surprised at why the courts are not functioning and why the courts at the first place were shut down. Constitutional courts should never shut down.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Avtar Singh Chima. He's mentioned that there were many viral messages during curfew period, stimulating anxiety among people. What could be done faster to check these messages and punish the offenders?
This issue the whole world is battling. But what we have to be more cautious is what our governments and the organizations are saying. Whether what they are saying is applicable and it is correct or not. I would be more concerned about the disinformation spreading from government organizations than from people. That obviously is a matter of very, very big concern, and we have filed a PIL also. It is pending before the Honorable High Court. But yes, I agree because see again the kind of fear that has been put in people about COVID-19. My simple question is, what has changed on 23rd or 24th March? I'm not very sure about the date, when there were hardly a couple of hundred people who had this infection, and now we have crossed 2 lakh figure. So why did we close all this? Why did we create so much of fear in people? And why did we not think that without a cure, we have to live with this for a couple of years now? So we should not destabilize sports, economy. Just imagine if things could have been handled differently. That is a question we must ask ourselves.
The next question is from Harnoor. Sir, how to counter or stop being a social worker the dilution of labor laws by various states during these pandemic times? Because dilution of labor laws means violation of their labor welfare and rights, and even International Labor Organization is trying to intervene in this matter. Into this matter.
Yeah. So this is a very sad thing again, that every time we talk of economic reforms, we have to take away the rights of the marginalized people. This is not correct. There are so many structural issues. The issues are regarding a governance. The issues are, and that is again at the government side. So to take away the rights and this thing of marginalized farmers is very naive and immature. And I think International Labour Organization has recently issued a statement condemning, this thing by a few state governments, and those state governments have also taken back those notifications. That's something good. But as a society, yes, we all need to speak more about it.
The next question is from Ishpreet. Do you think the schemes that are made for the marginalized population are able to reach them all? Even in this pandemic, migrant labor workers are not getting any help from the judiciary.
No, I would say yes to some extent. A lot of state governments have done very exemplary work, like Kerala, Delhi. A lot of state governments have done exemplary work, because feeding lakhs and lakhs of people on just a notice of few days, and getting the whole logistics and infrastructure ready to deal with that kind of a problem. Yes, these a lot of good work has happened. But again, we must not understand that it is the NGOs and NGOs and NGOs who have been the iron frame of India. The people, the social organizations, the gurdwaras, who have opened their doors to ensure that people are fed. But what happened to migrant laborers is very heart wrenching. It is very sad. In a country, in a democratic country of Gandhi, it should not have. It certainly should not have.
Thank you so much, sir. There are two questions, and I'm sure that they are the last. Crime rate like ransom, loot, intoxication is increasing because imprisonment is not possible due to COVID.
No, that is not the case. See, the issue of crime, whenever such economic hardships they happen, they are accompanied by certain social distortions also. So you would expect, I mean, what would a hungry person do? What do you expect him to do? He would go and steal the food. There are no jobs available. There is going to be an issue of law and order. And I think our governments must think about it, must think so many times, that the moment you put people to economic hardship, it will just not remain to, it will not remain confined to economics. It will come back to society, it will come back to politics.
Okay, recently NALSA issues an orders directing this SLSA to assist and provide free legal aid to those in need of it. The importance of legal aid during these times is paramount. In countries like South Africa and Kenya, legal aid and services are categorized as essential services, so that they can be provided to the people of the country seamlessly. Why? What is it? What is this Why is this not the case with India? Even when the directive principles of legal aid play an important and essential role in times like these.
So, this is exactly what Justice Morlidhar has said, that it is one of the fundamental rights of Indians to have to avail justice. And yes, I agree. But my other question is that how many people know about this? How many people? What is the percentage of litigants to the total population of this country? I mean, that would be very, very minimal. So, how many people are approaching judiciary? Whether we are able to go to the villages, whether we are able to go to the slums and educate them that look, you have legal rights, you must approach courts. Is that happening? And all those people who are literate, they are losing their faith in judiciary very fast, because it takes years and years for things to settle down. And that is why we run in our publication reform judiciary. We want that it is time that there are changes in CRPC and CPC. I hope something happens in that.
Thank you, sir. This is a question from Dr. Sukhdev Singh Sohal. Don't you think the silence or passivity of the courts has political overtones?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Recently, many senior lawyers have said that the courts are not acting against the government, and there have been two transfers which we have seen, one in Delhi and now recently one in Gujarat, where a High Court judge, the moment they took on to the government, they were immediately transferred. So that's a very big concern. That is why are our constitutional courts, are being so wary of the government? The whole job is to challenge the government actions and government work and stand in support of the people. Now, which is not happening, which is very, very distressing. Yes, indeed.
Okay, the question is from pandemic, we saw most NGOs helped more than government organizations. Do you think we should give more liberty to NGOs to take up causes like this during initial stages of pandemic, and even NGOs were not allowed to operate?
Yes. So this is, when we say that in the last couple of years, NGOs have been been given a very raw deal, because the CRAs had been cancelled. A lot of very credible organizations, they were harmed because they would speak against the government. Uh, and now, when the pandemic actually happened, Niti Aayog summoned 90,000 NGOs all across India, because they knew it very well that government is not equipped, and they are just not equipped to look after the marginalized population and provide them assistance. So, like I said in my presentation, over 70, I mean, you see all these police officials and IAS and all these people taking their photographs and putting them on newspapers. But the real heroes have been NGOs, who have provided 70% of essentials from their own pockets and through their own distribution network. It is not the government, it is the NGOs who have actually played up.
So I think we're running out of time. Paru, please, if you could give the word of thanks.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Monica, for conducting this very meaningful interactive session. It's my personal duty to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Center for Social Work and Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology. I thank the speakers, Mr. Mahavir Singh and Mr. Nikhil Saraf, on such informative talks on the role of the state legal services during the ongoing pandemic period. I would also like to thank our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajkumarji, and our Dean University Instruction, Professor Singlaji, for motivating and supporting the joint series of webinars related to COVID-19 on various issues ranging from the sociological analysis, the historical analysis, the mental impact of lockdowns, the issue of domestic violence, and today on the legal aspects associated with the pandemic. Today's talk was beneficial not only for researchers from the Center for Social Work, but for all stakeholders of our university and society in general to highlight their legal rights. I thank all our colleagues who joined us from departments of Punjab University and Guru Nanak Dev University, and to all our research scholars and students. Special thanks to Professor Sukhdev Singh Sohal, Professor Sheena, Professor Renu Thakur, Dr. Namita Gupta, amongst others. Thanks a lot. Over to Mona.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Actually, the Thanksgiving has been done, but there are two very important questions. If you could just take up.
Yeah, ma'am, please.
Sir, legal help to healthcare workers in the pandemic. One question is this, and there's another question is, as we have seen that they have been attacked in many places in India. This is connected questions. This is a connected question.
Now, all of a sudden during the pandemic, we have labeled our doctors and nurses as warriors. I would just like to ask one question. This medical negligence, is the negligence such kind of a negligence according to any other field like lawyers, like people in administration? So before you want to provide them with other things, you do one thing: put them at parity with others. Don't single them out for negligence. If you want that, then everyone should be accountable on the same standards as you are holding the doctors, accountable for medical negligence. And on coming onto the main question, yes, they are very, very vulnerable because they are actually interacting with COVID people. But I know our doctors and healthcare professionals, personally also and professionally also, we have one of the most robust healthcare, doctors who are amazing at their work. We all can rest assured that till the time they are there, they're going to really, really be there for the.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. It's been really kind of you to spare time and be here with us to have this session, which has been very beneficial. So I thank once again all the participants from all over India and all the students and research scholars. Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Nikhil Sawan. Thank you
ma'am.
for joining us. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.